Well, our helicopter again providing some absolutely extraordinary live pictures for us in northwest London. Let's talk now to the meteorologist Paul Knightley. And Paul, we're looking at these live pictures now with the whole sides of houses just ripped away. It's an extraordinary force from this tornado. What actually gives it that force?
Well, a tornado, as I'm sure people have spoken to already, is what's a violently rotating column of air, usually pendant from a thunderstorm cloud. And what gives it its force, really, is the fact that the thunderstorm above is sucking the air up very rapidly into the base of the storm. And much like water goes down a plug hole, it speeds up, goes faster and faster and faster as the sort of force, if you like, sucks the water out of the bath. There's similar things happening with a thunderstorm. And the other thing that causes lots of damage with tornadoes is once they've started creating damage, they pick up bits of debris, bits of houses, bits of trees and things like that. And, of course, they then accelerate them very rapidly up to 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, maybe more. And, of course, that then rams into the side of other buildings or other objects. And pretty soon as it crosses a major urban area like this, you know, the tornado is full of all sorts of things that can create massive amounts of damage, even if the wind itself might not have caused the damage had it not had this debris in it. So the debris can cause a lot of the damage in a tornado.
And we heard some witnesses describe the size of it as about 20, 30 metres in width. Just give us an idea, is that a big tornado for this country?
Most tornadoes in this country, I suppose, would be at a similar size, maybe slightly wider. I mean, often the damage extends further away from the funnel than just, you know, the width of the funnel itself. So though the funnel cloud may have appeared quite narrow, the actual area of damage can often be almost sometimes twice as large as that because the wind is still circulating around rapidly outside the funnel. The largest UK tornadoes can be perhaps half a mile wide, some of the very large ones that have occurred in the past. But most tornadoes in the world are not particularly large and don't last for very long, even in the US, where, you know, we do see images of big tornadoes there, but most of their tornadoes are still very small. Just for comparison, though, the largest tornado sort of ever recorded was in the US state of Nebraska a couple of years ago, and that was almost 2 miles wide. So that kind of gives you an idea that this was a fairly small tornado by those standards, but it still was a tornado nonetheless, and of course it's done all this damage.
Yes, exactly. On that point, we're looking at that damage now with our live pictures. What puzzles me is, why does it just touch down and then a few hundred metres later take off again? What causes that in the first place?
Well, unfortunately, the processes by which tornadoes are formed are still very sort of quite poorly understood because, you know, it's so difficult to actually find one, you know, and study the wind patterns around. And a lot of this has been done in the USA, where they send storm chasers out to try and investigate the wind patterns around a tornado. The fact that tornadoes don't occur all the time obviously shows that there's a very delicate set of circumstances that create them, and they often, those balances of the air being pulled into the thunderstorm, the way that the thunderstorm itself is interacting with the air coming into it, they tend to only last for very short periods of time, you know, that kind of perfect condition. So a lot of the time the thunderstorm itself is already causing the tornado to break up by pushing much colder air out. We've seen reports of the hailstones, the heavy rain as well. That brings lots of cold air down out the storm, and the tornado is powered by warm air, so as soon as cold air comes out the storm and gets pulled into the tornado circulation, it very rapidly erodes the tornado. So it's only when you get a very perfect balance between the warm air being sucked into the storm and the cold air coming out the storm that the tornado will persist for any length of time. Most of the time, as in this case, very rapidly this cold air overtakes the tornado, cuts off the supply of warm air, and the tornado's over and done with within a few seconds' time. In kind of big examples where tornadoes can last several hours, there's basically a perfect balance between the air being sucked into the storm and the air coming down out the storm.
It's perfectly evident, listening to the various people who actually experienced this, that they were just so totally shocked that this should happen in just an ordinary residential area of North London. But I was quite interested with our man here saying that we get as many as 30 to 40 of these tornadoes every year in this country.
That's right, yeah. I mean, tornadoes are not a rarity to the British Isles as a whole. Obviously, they are very rare for, local people to see. Most people are not going to see a tornado in their lifetimes, but we've seen several actually over the last week or two. There was one near Aberystwyth just the other day. Previous week there was one in Portsmouth, just north of Portsmouth, that did some damage there. In fact, the one in Aberystwyth was quite quite severe damage. Probably winds of over 100 miles an hour in that one, and that actually turned up in the middle of the night. So when everyone was asleep and basically got woken up by it. So yeah, we do get a fair number of tornadoes a year. A lot of them, of course, are out over the countryside. They do no more damage than perhaps knock a couple of trees down, maybe damage the odd house here and there. But of course, it's more rare to get one passing over a built-up area, because most of the country is still, rural areas, and so most tornadoes don't pass over buildings. But of course, we know they can, because we had the Birmingham tornado a couple of years ago. Looking at the first pictures from this would suggest that although the damage is nasty, where it's occurred, the tornado itself was not probably as long-lived or powerful as the Birmingham one. Of course, that's absolutely no comfort whatsoever to the people who've had their houses damaged. So most people will not see a tornado in their lifetimes, but unfortunately, a few people now and again will do.
OK. Well, Paul Knightley, thanks for taking time to speak to us.
OK, thank you.